Welcome, one and all, to the High Pressure Podcast. My name is Jeff Beamish. I'm an air quality meteorologist at Spheros Environmental, based in the Twin Cities metro area. As always, I'm joined by my fellow forecasting colleagues, Patrick Zahn, lead air quality meteorologist, and Steve Irwin, air quality meteorologist. In our last podcast, we talked about the work that we do here at Spheros Environmental with the Sacramento Metropolitan Air Quality District in regards to their Spare the Air program that runs during these summer months. And the primary goal of that program is, as it says, to spare the air from ground level ozone. Much like the rest of the country during the summer months in Sacramento, sunny skies, light winds, and very hot temperatures combine with emissions to develop ground level ozone that could be dangerous at times throughout these summer months. Now we're going to give you a much broader outlook for ground level ozone for the Sacramento region and give you kind of a preview of what we are really focusing in on as we're heading into the summer months in regards to what could be driving the development of ground level ozone and the potential for wildfire smoke impacting Northern California. We'll take a look at the current El Nino conditions, how that may play into the air quality forecast over the next couple of months. We'll also take a peek at the climate models and get a look at the National Wildland Fire Potential Outlook, as we could be heading into a very active wildfire season across the West. One of the biggest topics right now happening in the weather world, whether it relates to weather or air quality, is El Nino and what that could possibly mean as we're heading into the summer and certainly the winter months in Northern California. As a refresher, what is El Nino? El Nino is when you have warmer than normal waters that develop in the Eastern Pacific Ocean. And that can tie into having some fairly large impacts on weather patterns across North America. Where are we at right now with El Nino? Let's start with that first. By all metrics, what we're looking at here is a sea surface temperature anomaly plume. This is a forecast from the ECMWF, and to the layman, you may know this as the European model. And this is forecasting out sea surface temperatures, whether they're going to be warmer than normal or cooler than normal in the coming months. And as you can see, pretty much all the red lines are pointing up or sloping up. That indicates that not only is El Nino present currently in the Eastern Pacific, but we'll see those waters in the Eastern Pacific continue to get warmer as we're heading into the summer, and especially as we're heading into the winter months as well. What could that mean, though, specific to Northern California for the summer months when Spare the Air is happening, the Spare the Air season? So let's start at temperature anomalies. This is a map put together by NOAA where we pulled similar summers leading up to a strong El Nino, 1991, 1997, 2015, and 2023. And these are the years, and this is the period we looked at, June through October, leading into a strong El Nino. What do those, what we call analog years, what do those analog years say? Well, typically temperatures during the summer before a strong El Nino tend to be warmer than normal across Northern California, much more so across the Pacific Northwest, into the Northern Rockies, and into the Northern Plains as well. From a precipitation standpoint, leading up to a strong Nino, those analog years, 1991, 1997, 2015, and 2023, a little unclear on whether there's going to be above or below normal precipitation. Now, if you've lived in Northern California long enough, you know that summer tends to be the dry season, and there's no reason to believe that won't be the case as we're heading into this summer. And really, when you look at precipitation anomalies relative to El Nino, you see a much stronger anomaly signal as you're heading into the winter months. That's when you see much more of an impact of El Nino on those weather circulation patterns across North America.
Thanks, Jeff. So one thing I just wanted to highlight, if we are focusing on just the Sacramento region, the signal in terms of anomalies isn't very strong for us heading into a strong El Nino. We can see that the temperature anomaly was slightly positive for Northern California, but there wasn't much of a precipitation anomaly. So I just wanted to highlight that just because it's a really strong El Nino year, the impacts in a particular location may not be that noteworthy. There's a lot of uncertainty associated with sort of the countrywide predictions based only on El Nino.
And what's important to point out, though, with El Nino's impacts on precipitation, you have to kind of think about how precipitation develops between the summer and the winter. In the winter months, you have very large storm systems that move across the country with large amounts of moisture, and you get widespread, rain and snowfall, where El Nino really impacts that. In the summer months, your precipitation is more what we call convective driven. In other words, is where you have these pop-up thunderstorms developing. Sometimes you get organized lines of thunderstorms developing along cold fronts. But all in all, the scale of precipitation during the summer months tends to be a little smaller than the scale of precipitation during the winter months because the storm systems in the winter months tend to be much larger and encompass several regions across the United States. So looking back at the analog years for summers leading up to strong El Ninos, it is certainly one good tool to use when assessing what may happen regarding air quality and ozone in the Sacramento region. Another great tool that we use, let me backtrack on that, specifically that Steve Irwin uses, is the climate model predictions because he is like the czar of climate model prediction interpretation here at Spheros Environmental. So to dive into the climate models, we'll turn it over to Steve. And Steve, you are like the Picasso when it comes to climate model prediction interpretation. So it is your time to shine.
Oh, thank you for that introduction, Jeff. Yeah, so when we're looking at climate models, El Nino is one aspect of the climate system, but it's just one part of one ocean, right? We're looking at the Eastern Pacific. Whereas the climate models actually take many more things into account, all the different oceans, conditions in the polar regions. And so it's more complex, taking a bigger number of signals into what it's going to predict for the upcoming summer. And so the first graphic here we have is from that same European model. We're looking up at 500 millibars, which is about 18,000 feet off ground level. You might be thinking, okay, we're talking about surface ozone and temperatures at ground level. Why are we concerned with what's happening up high? Well, what's happening up high is generally a symptom of what's happening underneath that level. And so if we get a large area of above normal temperatures near the surface, that kind of stacks the atmosphere up in a way that, there are warmer temperatures aloft as well. It's going to show up high to what's happening down low. And so we have this ridge of high pressure that's basically centered over the Rockies or just east of the Rockies into the northern plains there. And this makes a lot of sense when we look at the previous graphics from El Nino, where we have this ridge along the Rockies, maybe a little bit east, and that corresponds pretty well with the warmest temperatures from those El Nino analog years. Normally you would expect surface high pressure just downwind of that ridge, so you'd have more clear skies, hotter temperatures, and that matches up really well with where those highest anomalies are expected for surface temperatures this summer. So that all makes sense. It looks like most of the country is seeing these above normal heights in the mid levels of the atmosphere. So again, pointing to an overall warm summer, especially for northern parts of the country. And some of this also is potentially impacted by El Nino in the way that when you have warm sea surface temperatures, the oceans hold so much heat. They have high heat content, high ability to absorb it and also radiate heat above. And so if the oceans are warming, we're going to expect the surrounding land masses to be warmer as well. And so as we go down here to the next graphic, we're going to look at the European model's predictions of temperatures near the surface this summer. And it matches up again pretty well with that El Nino map, El Nino analog map, where we have the warmest, above normal surface temperatures across the Pacific Northwest, extending into the northern plains and even the Midwest. Focusing on the Sacramento region, we also see some slightly above normal temperatures there with that surface ridge just east of the region. And so hot temperatures helps ozone formation, as Patrick mentioned. The ridging can help ozone formation through clear skies, and the hot temperatures also dry out the vegetation, which will get to in a few minutes here. But so that matches up nicely. We like to see when different products are giving the same signal. That gives us some confidence as to the predictions ahead. So this is all looking good. One minor change, if we look at the next graphic, is in the precipitation forecast. The El Nino analogs didn't really have drying or moistening as in regards to precipitation this summer. The European model does have a little bit drier than normal conditions across the Pacific Northwest, which when coupled with the warmer than normal temperatures, the ridging, again, that points to perhaps vegetation drying out a little more readily than what we would normally see, more sunny skies, things of that nature. So all pointing towards some potentially above normal ozone development, especially for that region of the country in the Pacific Northwest. If we keep heading down to the next graphic, we're going to look at the prediction from the climate forecast system, the CFS version 2. And if we go specifically down to the ocean temperatures, I wanted to really highlight this forecast because this is something that's also being talked about quite a bit. Southern California are already experiencing much above normal sea surface temperatures early on this summer. I saw a reel recently from San Diego lifeguards talking about stingrays, the stingray population already increasing there early this summer, which is not something you normally see quite this early, but they come along with the warmer water temperatures. And so this is the forecast for sea surface temperatures through this summer, and it's the anomaly. So are we above or below normal? This map is showing well above normal temperatures, sea surface temperatures off the coast of northern Baja and Southern California. So this would also add to, warm temperatures over land, but with the warming, also with warm ocean waters, we might also expect evaporation to be stronger when you have that warmer sea surface temperature, which adds moisture to potential cloud development and potentially thunderstorm development whenever we get the monsoon pattern setting up over Arizona. That could drive some thunderstorm activity up into California, maybe earlier, maybe longer than we would normally expect to see. Potentially some tropical development could last a little bit longer, at least the remnants getting closer to California. And if we're looking at a hot, dry summer, thunderstorm activity, lightning, we've seen some just terrible seasons in the past, not only for smoke, but how smoke impacts ozone when those lightning started fires commence during hot and dry periods. So definitely things to think about as we head into this coming summer.
Yeah, and I want to add, that's a great outlook, Steve. Thank you for that. What I want to add regarding the sea surface temperature anomaly here from CFS, with that blob of warmer than normal sea surface temperatures showing up in sort of the darker reds there, the potential for tropical activity could also extend into October as well. As a former meteorologist that resided in Tucson, Arizona, there were several Septembers into early Octobers where we had surges of moisture getting caught up in upper level storm systems, triggering thunderstorm development. What that means specific to the Sacramento region, though, is a similar transport path ahead of storm systems, maybe seeing some of that moisture from a decaying tropical system drifting into Northern California, maybe not necessarily seeing the rainfall, but maybe seeing the lightning out of it. Something to be aware of as we're heading into the latter portion of the summer and early fall. Patrick.
Yeah, so one thing I wanted to highlight from some of the previous maps, first of all, Steve, I think it was the European model prediction for the season in Northern California, it did have a more pronounced warm anomaly than the El Nino analog years. So just focusing on that, it did suggest that it could be warmer than normal just in Sacramento. But I have to say, when I was starting to look at these maps overall, even before we got to the ocean temperature anomalies, when I saw the maps that depicted the warmer than normal temperatures extending from Northern California into the Pacific Northwest, even farther into Western Canada, then into the Rockies, it raised alarm bells for me. And then that combined with potentially drier than normal conditions over the Pacific Northwest, I immediately thought, oh no, there is the potential for massive wildfires, which we've seen in the past, but especially when it's warmer and drier. And so I thought maybe we shouldn't just be focusing on the localized conditions or anomalies right in Sacramento. There could be bigger features at play here. And then that combined with what you just mentioned about the potential for more dry lightning strikes, I think it's a potentially volatile situation here when we're talking about fires and smoke.
Definitely. And we do see smoke transport from the Pacific Northwest pretty often. The 500 millibar map that we looked at earlier had the trough just offshore, but when that trough comes onshore and we get surface high pressure behind that over the Pacific Northwest, that can drive northerly winds into the Sacramento Valley, so bringing in smoke from fires to the north. Another difficult thing we've seen in the last several years is when those fires are along the coast of, say, Oregon, and the smoke gets entrained into the marine layer offshore. It comes down the coast where there aren't air quality monitors. It's sometimes hard to differentiate smoke from low clouds over the Pacific. So you can get into some really complex smoke and ozone predictions with fires in potentially multiple locations to the north there.
I feel like we've done a podcast talking about the challenges of smoke forecasting. Might ring a bell to you too. Yeah, offshore smoke is definitely one of the more difficult things to pinpoint across the western United States, especially moving into the Bay Area and Sacramento region for sure. So, want to talk about another tool or another outlook for the season. That would be officially from NOAA, the Climate Prediction Center outlook for the July, August, September period here. There's no real surprises if you're taking notes off this podcast. Above average temperatures expected across Northern California and the Pacific Northwest. The seasonal precipitation outlook below average into the Pacific Northwest. Equal chances of above normal or below average precip for Northern California. Then you see that blob of green across the desert Southwest. That would indicate that potential for enhanced monsoonal activity based off of an active eastern Pacific hurricane season due to those warmer than normal waters. So all of that kind of meshes from everything that we've talked about before. So we looked at the analog years for summers leading up to a strong El Nino. We looked at the climate models and the Climate Prediction Center outlook. And one of the general themes is that it's going to be warm in Northern California and the Pacific Northwest. Drier than normal conditions are possible across the Pacific Northwest and Northern California. And we could see an uptick in monsoonal thunderstorm activity in the desert Southwest that may end up leading to enhanced chances for dry lightning in Northern California. So now we want to pinpoint what the wildfire outlook is for Northern California and the Sacramento region as we are heading into the summer months here. What we're looking at right now is the significant wildland fire potential outlook for the United States. This is put together on a monthly basis by the National Interagency Fire Center. We'll call them NIFC for short. For June, it is showing an above average potential for significant wildland fires across a large portion of California, desert Southwest, and once you get east of the Cascades in the Pacific Northwest. As we head towards July, we continue to see that above average potential for wildfires across Northern California and the Pacific Northwest. August, it's lather, rinse, repeat, and September, lo and behold, it continues to show an above average potential for significant wildfires. Some of that could be driven by dry lightning strikes. Some of that could be driven by offshore wind events. Nonetheless, and of course, the temperature aspect is certainly in play here along with drought. So Steve, Patrick, I turn it over to you guys here, looking at the above average wildfire potential across Northern California and the Pacific Northwest. What are some of your key takeaways from this outlook from NIFC?
Well, one thing that I try to remember, Jeff, at least in recent years, is that it seems like there has to be smoke in the Sacramento region for us to reach a full-on spare the air day. Because of improvements in emissions, spare the air days for ozone are generally very rare, and the addition of smoke and the ozone precursors that are in that smoke really pushes them over the edge on some occasions. So my takeaway is we really need to be on the lookout for new fires and the potential for smoke transport, either from the Pacific Northwest or the really challenging offshore smoke situations, so that we can be on top of these situations where we might see higher than normal ozone concentrations, especially because they're enhanced by the smoke. So it could definitely be a major player in just the number of spare the air days that we see towards the end of the summer, especially.
Yeah, I was also thinking, Jeff, you had mentioned about the ongoing drought, and it is already very dry across the Pacific Northwest, especially where they have, I think, areas of severe drought already ongoing. So you add to that summer heat coming up, potentially drier than normal, conditions extending into the summertime. The fuels are already basically prepped. For burning this summer. And so, yeah, the hope is that that won't come to pass, but generally these predictions from the NIFC, ongoing drought, kind of all the meteorological parameters coming together, it does look like we'll be dealing with smoke impacting ozone this summer in Northern California.
Yeah, I think that's one of my main takeaways as well. And I'm glad you mentioned the drought because certainly as we're heading into the next several months here, we're certainly not getting an atmospheric river moving into Northern California. We're well beyond that season. So the drought numbers that you're looking at here, valid as of June 11th, these numbers are only going to be getting worse as we continue to dry out. We don't see rainfall. We see that vegetation curing, really priming us for what could be a very active wildfire season across the West, which in turn then would be impacting ozone AQI values in the Sacramento region. And maybe we start to see, a lot more of those smoke enhanced spare the air days when it comes to ozone AQI for Sacramento. Well, that wraps up our discussion on the ozone outlook for the Sacramento region heading into these summer months. We want to make sure that you are informed as far as air quality forecasts and air quality alerts in the Sacramento region. You can sign up for those alerts and forecasts at sparetheair.com. To see the current AQI values, you can go to airnow.gov. They have a great interactive map available for you. Or to see PM 2.5 AQI values, the current AQI values for PM 2.5, use the AirNow Fire and Smoke map. That's fire.airnow.gov. And to see the amazing work we do here at Spheros Environmental, please visit our website, spherosenv.com. I'm Jeff Beamish.
I'm Patrick Zahn.
And I'm Steve Irwin.
Thanks for listening to the High Pressure Podcast.